Hey guys, tonight we're wandering somewhere even history teachers are too embarrassed to Google in public, the medieval brothel. That's right. Tonight, you're not just time traveling, you're moonlighting as a customer in the most notorious after-hours hotspot of the Middle Ages. A place with more hay in the sheets than a barn, more drama than a reality TV reunion, and enough questionable smells to make even Febreze give up hope. So before you settle in, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, switch on a fan for that white noise, and get as comfortable as possible. Let's get curious for a second. Have you ever wondered what a night out meant in the Middle Ages? Did anyone actually survive the experience with their dignity and all their toes intact? What happened when you walked into a medieval brothel with your week's pay and your best potato sack shirt? Did anyone actually have fun, or was it just plague, pickpockets, and perpetual itching? What passed for romantic ambiance? A single melting candle and a bucket of something unspeakable in the corner. Would you last a night? Or would you tap out after your first whiff of medieval cologne? Spoiler, it's not cologne. Congratulations. You've just woken up in 1351. The bells are ringing, your shoes are missing, and someone's just handed you a wooden token stamped with a picture of a goat. Welcome to the medieval brothel. Hope you're up to date on your tetanus shots. You arrive at the shadiest neighborhood in town, a labyrinth of creaky wooden alleys, flickering torches, and enough suspicious puddles to keep you permanently on tiptoe. The red light is less neon, more someone spilled wine on a torch. The locals eye you up and down, clearly betting how long you'll last before running home. It's not exactly the Vegas Strip. No neon, no sequins, just the constant clatter of shoes on warped planks and the faint, ever-present odor of week-old stew. Every building here leans at a suspicious angle, as if the whole street agreed to slump toward the gutter in solidarity. Windows glow with a greasy sort of warmth, thick with shadowy figures, and the occasional glimpse of someone's elbow or, on a wild night, someone's entire goat. You walk past a tangle of hanging signs, most depicting rabbits, jugs, or extremely optimistic-looking women painted by someone who had clearly never seen an actual woman before. As you move deeper into the red light district, the soundtrack of the town shifts. The clanging of church bells fades, replaced by off-key lute music, distant laughter, and the guttural shouts of someone negotiating the going rate for a turnip. If you're hoping for romance, prepare for a crash course in disappointment. If you're looking for adventure, congratulations, you're already in danger of getting mugged by a child. This is the side of town the respectable folks pretend doesn't exist. The streets have names like Cock Lane and Maiden's Alley, just subtle enough to fool no one. Merchants steer clear after dark, unless they're here to lose their wages, their dignity, or both. The gutters are clogged with straw, muddy rainwater, and the odd wooden clog presumably left behind in a hasty escape. The lighting is minimal, provided by smoky lanterns or, in a pinch, a burning pile of mystery rags. You can feel the weight of history and bad decisions pressing in from every angle. There's a palpable sense that anything could happen here. Most of it embarrassing. All of it expensive. Every door is slightly ajar, beckoning or warning you in, depending on your credit. Occasionally, you spot a doorman who's really just a large cousin of someone in the brothel, holding a stick and a look of permanent disappointment. Stray cats rule the district, weaving between your legs and eyeing your pouch as if calculating whether you might be edible. A dog barks from somewhere overhead. Yes, overhead. That's just how architecture works here. You pass a group of regulars perched on barrels, trading rumors and turnips, laughing at newcomers. They see you and nod. Fresh meat, you smile, pretending you're not afraid of tetanus or emotional scarring. Sensory overload is part of the experience. The air is thick with the smell of spilt ale, wood smoke, sweat, and a top note of regret. You catch snippets of conversation, mostly warnings, some propositions, a few complaints about the draft in room 3 and the lice in room 2. There's the sharp clink of coins changing hands, the duller sound of coins being dropped and immediately lost between the planks. Some of the houses advertise themselves with colourful fabric banners, the medieval equivalent of a flashing sign, though here the fabric is more whole than cloth and looks like it's been repurposed from a tent or, possibly, an old shroud. Children chase rats in the gutter, while their mothers shout warnings from doorways, only half joking about curses or the haunted privy in the back alley. And yet, for all its grime and chaos, the red light district hums with a peculiar kind of energy, dangerous, desperate, and oddly welcoming. This is where the rules of polite society come to die, where anonymity is possible, and where everyone is equal in the eyes of scandal. If you're brave, or simply out of better options, you keep walking, heart pounding, shoes wet, wallet lighter by the minute. Welcome to the real nightlife of medieval Europe. Don't trip on the goat. At last, you find yourself standing in front of the brothel. Or, more accurately, you think you do, because in the medieval red light district, distinguishing features is code for nothing looks like the sign. You're greeted by the architectural love child of a barn, a haunted tavern, and a chicken coop that lost the will to live. The building lists gently to one side, as if it's trying to sneak out of town without paying the rent. The walls are a patchwork of timber, cracked wattle, and a generous application of what you desperately hope is just mud. The so-called entrance is marked by a swinging sign with a rabbit painted on it, possibly, you're told, the lucky rabbit. But the creature's expression is less lucky and more resigned. Beneath the sign, a curtain that's seen too many winters and not enough laundry flaps in the breeze, attempting to block out the world and failing miserably. If you look closely, the edges are gnawed, either by rats or by customers suffering a particularly aggressive hangover. There's no grand double door, no velvet rope. Instead, you're greeted by a plank door so battered it has splinters older than some of the patrons. Hinges creak in protest as you push it open, a sound that is, in medieval terms, the official welcome chime of brotheldom. The threshold is sticky. Why? No one asks. No one answers. Above the door, an iron lamp swings uneasily, filled with rancid animal fat. It casts a dim yellow glow on everything and everyone, making everyone look just a little more mysterious and a lot less healthy. This is the mood lighting. You step onto a stoop covered in what looks like the ruins of a cabbage market, or possibly last night's entertainment gone wrong. If you're lucky, the only thing you step in is mud. Next to the door, a couple of regulars linger. They size you up like they're auditioning for a before picture in a public health warning. One flashes a toothy grin, or possibly just a gap where a tooth used to be. Another fiddles with a deck of battered playing cards, offering a game for stakes. You decline, suddenly aware you don't even know the rules or what you'd be wagering, your shoes, your dignity, or perhaps a goat. Security is tight, medieval style. There's a doorman, or at least someone pretending to be one. He's asleep, propped up on a barrel, snoring into a mug of ale. His weapon is a stick, which he occasionally uses to fend off children, dogs, or the resident goose, who clearly outranks him in both authority and hygiene. The goose honks as you approach, and you instinctively apologize. Windows, if you can call them that, are slats of wood covered by smudged animal skin. They offer privacy in the same way a wet piece of paper offers shelter in a hurricane. From inside, muffled laughter leaks out. along with the unmistakable twang of a lute and the ongoing saga of a very one-sided bar fight. As you stand there, taking it all in, the sounds and smells begin to merge into a sort of historical fog. The building might look like it's one strong wind away from collapse, but for all its disrepair, this place is alive. There's movement behind the curtains, faces peeking through the cracks, the low hum of conversation, and the constant, not-so-gentle reminder that you are no longer anywhere respectable. A waft of roasted onions and sweat drifts by. You realize there's no turning back. The threshold is behind you, the adventure is ahead, and somewhere inside, a night you'll probably regret, and definitely remember, awaits. Welcome to the medieval brothel. Don't touch the walls. Just don't. You've made it through the front door. Congratulations. Most people don't get this far without losing a shoe or a small amount of blood. Now comes the true test of survival. Figuring out the entry fee, the house rules, and why the bouncer appears to be negotiating with a chicken. Forget everything you know about velvet ropes and hostess stands. Here, the check-in process involves a short line of nervous customers clutching battered wooden tokens. Some tokens are stamped with rabbits, others with mysterious numbers, and at least one features what could be either a saint or a carrot. No one seems sure what their token actually gets them. Entry, a room, a drink, or just a polite nod from the goose. A large, sleepy man, whose job title is somewhere between doorman and regional manager of disappointment, sits on a stool next to a makeshift table. His ledger is a scrap of wood, his pen a very determined feather, and his only real function is to look intimidating and to occasionally wake up long enough to tell people, no refunds. He eyes you with suspicion, then with boredom, and finally waves you forward. Payment is expected, but the accepted currency is flexible. Coins, bread, eggs, a nice onion, or a particularly shiny pebble all have value here, provided you negotiate with enough confidence. If you're low on actual money, you might try to pay with a favor or a story. Sometimes the staff even prefers gossip. News about a rival, a noble's embarrassing rash, or the whereabouts of the mayor's lost pig. The price of admission isn't fixed so much as it's creatively interpreted on a nightly basis. You hand over your token and whatever else you can spare, hopefully not your last sock. And in return, you receive a small wooden tally stick marked with a notch. This is your proof of entry, and probably your only receipt. Don't lose it. If you do, there's a 50-50 chance you'll either be politely escorted out or forcibly adopted by the resident cat. The bouncer gestures for you to step inside, but not before giving you a perfunctory pat-down. His security check consists of making sure you're not carrying a sword, an open wound, or any food you might be tempted to share with the house goat. Weapons are frowned upon, unless you're the staff, in which case a rolling pin is standard issue. Behind you, another guest tries to argue their way in with 3 turnips and the promise of a really good story about a bishop. The bouncer considers, shrugs, and lets them pass. You get the feeling that the rules here are more suggestion than policy. If you look confident and don't startle the goose, you can get away with just about anything. Inside the entryway, a narrow hallway opens up, already packed with people jostling for position. The air is thick with anticipation, and with it, the possibility that someone's about to spill soup on your shoes. Overhead, a faded sign declares the house motto in Latin, which no one, including the staff, can read. It probably says something like caveat emptor or no spitting. The ritual is done. You're through the first gauntlet. Not mugged, not thrown out, and still in possession of most of your dignity. Now you're free to plunge into the dimly lit, chaotic world of the brothel itself. where the rules are unwritten, the price is negotiable, and the bouncer is still watching the chicken out of the corner of his eye. Welcome to the inner sanctum. Just remember, if you see the goose running, run faster. Step inside, and it quickly becomes clear. This brothel isn't just a den of questionable romance, it's a tight ship. If the ship were captained by someone who considers hygiene a type of heresy. At the helm is the madam, a woman of indeterminate age, indestructible spirit, and at least 3 visible tattoos. She surveys the scene like a battle-scarred general, armed with a ladle in one hand and a glare that could curdle goat's milk. If she likes you, you might get a wink. If she doesn't, you'll be shown the exit, accompanied by the business end of her ladle and some surprisingly creative insults. She knows everything: who owes what, who's sneaking extra bread, who's hiding a stolen spoon up their sleeve. Her memory is legendary. Forget to pay once, and she'll remind you every time you walk through the door for the rest of your natural life. She is both judge and jury, and if things get rowdy, she's also the local police force. Don't let the patched dress fool you. She's as sharp as the knives she hides in her apron and twice as quick. The staff is a cast of characters worthy of their own tragicomic play. First up are the entertainers, a term used with more hope than accuracy. They work in shifts, drifting between the common room and the dim hallways, each with their own signature move. A crooked smile, a well-timed joke, or just the world's best eye roll. Some look as though they stepped out of a romantic tapestry. Others, more like they crawled in from the local swamp and simply refused to leave. No matter their style, every one of them has mastered the art of small talk, quick change artistry, and the ability to dodge hands with the speed of a startled squirrel. Then there's the cook, who may or may not be the madam's distant cousin, depending on who you ask. He's permanently wreathed in onion fumes, stained from a lifetime of experimenting with whatever was cheapest at the market, and has a suspicious knowledge of which mushrooms are only slightly poisonous. His stew is legendary for its ability to silence complaints and, if you're unlucky, your digestive system. He moves through the kitchen like a man on a mission, brandishing ladles, muttering curses, and scaring away the mice who would rather take their chances with the cat. Speaking of which, no staff would be complete without the brothel's unofficial mascot, a battle-scarred cat named Lord Whiskerton. He serves as rat catcher, food critic, and, occasionally, emotional support animal for homesick patrons. He's been known to accept bribes in the form of sausage scraps, but don't try to pet him unless you're prepared for the business end of several very medieval claws. The cleaning staff is a whirlwind of arms, aprons, and occasional muttering about who let the goat in again. They're responsible for sweeping the main room, changing out the hay in the luxury suites, and strategically placing bundles of herbs in hopes of masking the more persistent odors. Some nights, you'll see them with buckets, chasing after patrons who have misplaced their dinner, or mopping up the aftermath of a particularly enthusiastic night of dice throwing. Hovering around the edges are the bouncers, rotating members of the madam's extended family, each one larger and grumpier than the last. Their uniform is whatever was on the floor, and their training consists of do your best, and if in doubt, call the goose. And, of course, there's the bookkeeper, a sharp-eyed girl barely out of childhood, armed with chalk, an abacus, and the ability to shame grown men into settling their debts on the spot. No one escapes her math. All told, this place runs on equal parts fear, laughter, and whatever's fermenting in the kitchen. It's not glamorous, but it works. The staff may squabble and grumble, but together they keep the medieval madness humming. One suspicious stew, one missing sock, and one clucking goose at a time. Step further inside, and every sense is instantly assaulted in ways modern civilization has worked very hard to forget. First, the sights. The common room is packed wall to wall, ceiling to floor with the visual chaos of medieval nightlife. Candlelight flickers from a dozen tallow stubs jammed into every available surface. Sconces, bottles, a skull, someone's old boot, casting everyone in a buttery, jaundiced glow. Faces appear and vanish in the gloom. Wide-eyed newcomers clutching their purses, regulars deep in drink, and staff drifting through it all with the thousand-yard stare of professionals who have seen too much. The decor is a rich tapestry of questionable taste and outright defiance of fire codes. Faded tapestries, half of them hanging, the rest drooping, depict either famous knights or just particularly attractive turnips. There are jugs and mugs on every table, some half full, most sticky. Tables tilt at alarming angles, thanks to legs propped up with scrap wood, random bones, and one unfortunate hedgehog that refuses to move. If you look up, you'll notice the beams overhead are covered in the names and curses of patrons past, written in charcoal, spilled ale, or, on one memorable occasion, someone's own blood rumor says he's fine. Then, the sounds. The atmosphere is powered by a constant, overlapping symphony of laughter, shrieks, poorly tuned lute plucking, and the kind of singing that would get you forcibly ejected from any modern karaoke bar. Somewhere in the back, a dice game is in full swing, punctuated by the crash of a chair and a string of oaths that would make a bishop blush. Over it all, the madam's voice cuts through like a blade, barking orders, settling disputes, or threatening the stew pot with retirement. Staff weave through the crowd, shouting orders and dodging elbows. A group of rowdy merchants argue about the price of salt. A local juggler tries to entertain a table of stone-faced customers with 3 onions and a suspicious-looking knife. Every so often, someone attempts to start a dance, only for the effort to collapse in a heap of spilled ale and protest. Privacy is theoretical. Every secret is public, and every public act becomes next week's favorite rumor. And the sense. There's a prevailing aroma of wood smoke and tallow, underpinned by sweat, spilled ale, and the sharp tang of cheap perfume. On a good night, you might catch a whiff of roasting onions or the faintest memory of herbs. On a bad night, it's just feet, wet dog, and something best left uninvestigated. The staff combat this with bundles of lavender and rosemary stuffed into corners, but mostly they just add complexity to the fragrance profile. It's a smell that lingers in your hair, your clothes, and possibly your soul. Animals add their own notes. A cat patrols the floor for dropped morsels. The house goose struts in and out, shedding feathers and dignity. Occasionally, a goat appears, munching placidly on someone's abandoned cloak. No one questions the goat. There's an energy here, frantic, noisy, a little desperate, and thoroughly alive. If you stay still long enough, the chaos begins to feel almost comforting, like a very enthusiastic family reunion where everyone's a stranger. Your eyes adjust to the dimness, your ears filter the racket, and, eventually, your nose gives up and accepts its new reality. This is the pulse of the brothel, the flickering, crowded, ever-surprising heart of the medieval night. You haven't sat down yet, but already you're part of the story, whether you want to be or not. Congratulations, you've survived the entry gauntlet, dodged the chicken, and handed over your token. Now, for a price only slightly higher than your weekly wage, or a convincing story about a local bishop, you're shown to your private accommodations. Prepare yourself. The medieval brothel's luxury suite is an experience that will live on in your memory, your respiratory system, and possibly your medical records. Your host, often the youngest, fastest, or least superstitious member of the staff, guides you down a hallway so narrow you have to turn sideways to fit. The floorboards creak beneath every step, complaining like a choir of hungover monks. Occasionally, you spot a rat running ahead to make sure your room is ready. The walls are decorated with faded murals, most of which have been thoughtfully edited by generations of bored guests. If you're lucky, your name will join theirs by dawn. Your suite awaits. It's technically a room, in the way a broom closet is technically a ballroom if you really believe in yourself. There's a door, or at least something door-shaped, a splintery plank hung askew by two heroic hinges, and an optimistic latch. Privacy is a suggestion, enforced only by how loud you can snore. Step inside and marvel at the ambience. The centerpiece is a hay mattress, a lumpy, scratchy bundle of straw stuffed into a sheet that's seen more action than the local jousting field. It's not so much a bed as a nest, shared at times with local wildlife. The hay crackles with every movement, sending up small clouds of dust, and what you hope is just dust. The pillow is a burlap sack half filled with mystery, wool, feathers, or possibly rocks. Sheets are optional and decorative, in the sense that they started out white and now belong to the earth tone family. You check the window for fresh air. It's a masterpiece of medieval engineering. A tiny opening covered by a clouded animal bladder that lets in approximately 6 photons of light and a steady draft of outside weather. On cold nights, it's a wind tunnel. In summer, it's a mosquito parade. The window ledge is home to a candle stub, and maybe, if you're lucky, a dried herb bundle, rosemary to ward off evil, or at least the worst of the stench. Storage options are minimal. There's a single hook on the wall for your cloak, which bends under the weight of anything heavier than a dream. A battered wooden chest sits in the corner, meant for valuables. Everyone knows better than to use it. The last person who did is still looking for their shoes. Lighting comes courtesy of a single, flickering candle. It emits just enough light to let you see the stains on the wall and not enough to make out what caused them. Shadows lurk in every corner, occasionally twitching if a mouse passes by. For extra ambience, the door doesn't close all the way, so you get a free symphony of hallway sounds. Laughter, lute music, and the persistent honking of the house goose. If you crave modern amenities, the chamber pot is thoughtfully placed under the bed. It's been emptied, probably. A bucket of water in the corner is for washing up. The water is cold, hard, and alive with the spirit of medieval plumbing, which is to say, it's better used for putting out fires. And yet, for all its shortcomings, there's something oddly comforting about your little suite. Maybe it's the illusion of privacy, or maybe it's just the exhaustion setting in. In this room, you can almost forget you're in the wildest part of the city and pretend, just for a moment, that the hay mattress is a feather bed and the distant shouting is just the world wishing you good night. Just don't look under the bed or above it, or, honestly, at anything too closely. After the chaos of arrival and the overwhelming charm of your luxury suite, you might think, maybe it's time for dinner. Surely, after all this, a hearty medieval feast awaits: roast meats, fresh bread, and a goblet of fine wine. Let's manage expectations. Brothel cuisine is as legendary as the brothel itself, though mostly in the sense that no one's quite sure if it's real or just a cautionary tale. You find yourself ushered toward a communal table, or whatever passes for a table, a plank laid across 2 barrels, with enough wobble to keep every meal interesting. Seats are a patchwork of stools, benches, and, in one case, an upturned bucket with the words "Don't sit" painted on the side. You do anyway. It's the only spot left. A haze of wood smoke, onions, and boiling something fills the room. The kitchen is not so much a room as a corner where chaos has been allowed to simmer. The cook, a barrel-chested figure wearing a stained apron, and a permanent look of suspicion guards his cauldron like it's a chest of gold. The stew within has been bubbling since the last full moon, absorbing everything in its orbit. Root vegetables, suspicious chunks of meat, and a few items that might have once been bread or possibly shoe leather. It's called pottage, less of a dish, more of an ongoing science experiment. Every bowl is different, every spoonful a gamble. Dinner service is rapid and relentless. Bowls are slammed down in front of you with a grunt and a good luck. The color? Let's call it brown. The texture? Varies between mudslide and garden mulch. The flavor? Hearty, in a way that suggests you'll be full mostly from chewing. Floating in the mix are mysterious things. A carrot, a turnip, maybe a suspiciously crunchy bit you choose not to investigate further. Alongside the stew, you get bread. Not the fluffy golden loaves of artisan bakeries, but a dense slab that doubles as a self-defense weapon in case of sudden brawls. It's made from coarse flour, sometimes stretched with whatever's handy, acorns, lentils, or sawdust in lean times. You test its resilience with your knife. The bread wins. For those feeling brave, there's cheese, which, in this context, means something vaguely dairy-based, aged to a pungency that could strip paint. If it moves, send it back to the kitchen. Otherwise, it's yours to enjoy. As for drinks, ale is the safest bet. It's weak, sour, and served in a mug so battered it's probably older than the cook. Water is technically available, but the staff will give you a look that says, "We hope you've updated your will." There's also wine, which is closer to vinegar and comes from a jug that was, until recently, home to pickled eels. Every sip is a leap of faith and a minor gastrointestinal risk. The dining experience is communal in every sense. Elbows knock, spoons go missing, and lively debates break out over who got the best potato. There's only one. Overhead, the resident cat patrols the beams, hoping for dropped morsels, while the house goose investigates under the table for anything edible or not. For dessert, if you're lucky, there's a wrinkled apple or a hunk of honeycomb. If not, well, you can always chew on the end of your bread and reflect on your choices. By the time you finish, you're full of something. Hunger fades, replaced by the warm glow of survival. The meal may not be memorable for its flavor, but you'll remember the experience, and possibly the after effects, for days. Bon appetit, medieval style. If dinner didn't quite quench your thirst, or if the stew left your throat calling for mercy, the next challenge awaits. Beverages. In a medieval brothel, what you drink is almost as important as where you sit, who you offend, and how long you can dodge the house goose. Let's be clear, there are no craft cocktails, no artisanal mocktails, and certainly no chilled sparkling water. Instead, prepare for liquid history in its purest, most questionable form. The bar, if you can call a plank balanced over 2 barrels a bar, is manned by someone with the stern air of a tax collector and the hygiene of a swamp rat. They hand out mugs that have seen more action than the brothel itself. Each one is sticky, dented, and suspiciously warm, because no one ever washes them, and the previous user might have been very committed to their drink. You lift the mug, brace yourself, and sip. The taste is a symphony, a little sour, a little fermented, and entirely terrifying. That's ale, the weak kind, brewed for survival rather than flavor. Children drink it too. Don't ask why. It's safer than water, which is basically a medieval gamble with parasites as the house odds. The wealthy, or those pretending to be, may get wine. But this is wine as interpreted by someone who's possibly never seen a grape. It's tangy, thin, and occasionally fermented with more enthusiasm than skill. A sip may make you wince, choke, or question all your life choices. In some parts of the city, they add spices for flair. A pinch of something brown, a sprinkle of mystery, and a dash of regret. Every swallow is a daring adventure in chemistry and courage. Now, water. You'd think it would be safe, but in medieval Europe, water is rarely an ally. Streams, wells, and puddles are all teeming with bacteria, fungus, and small creatures you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. You could boil it, but only if you have a pot, fire, and a certain amount of optimism. Even then, it tastes faintly like your neighbor's livestock. Ale becomes the drink of choice not for pleasure, but sheer survival, a kind of liquid insurance policy against whatever lurks in unboiled H2O. Then there's the specialty brews. These are potions concocted in the back by the resident cook or herbalist, often a mix of boiled herbs, fermented fruit, and hope. Patrons who try them are taking a calculated risk. You might feel invigorated, or you might spend the next few hours negotiating your allegiance with the chamber pot. The madam swears they improve stamina, ward off the plague, and occasionally help you forget the smell of the common room. The only problem is, results vary, unpredictably. Communal drinking is another challenge entirely. Mugs are shared, spills are constant, and everyone's elbow seems determined to meet your nose. Conversation happens over the din of clanging mugs, off-key singing, and an occasional yell from someone who has just discovered their ale has been stolen by a cat. If you want a quiet sip, you can always stand in the corner, dodge the goose, and hope nobody spills anything on you. Spoiler: someone will. Drunken antics escalate quickly. Patrons start negotiating prices, recounting old scandals, or arguing about whether a turnip counts as a vegetable or a minor felony. The smell of stale ale mixes with the ever-present aroma of onions, sweat, and fear, creating an olfactory cocktail that lingers long after the mugs are empty. By the time you finish your drink, you've earned a degree in medieval survival and a minor award for bravery. Your lips taste faintly of fermented grains, your hands smell like mystery herbs, and your dignity is somewhere under the table. But here's the secret. This is all part of the charm. The ale, the questionable wine, the herbal experiments. They're not just beverages. They're rites of passage, social currency, and a subtle reminder that the Middle Ages were as much about endurance as indulgence. So, raise your mug, clink it gently against the nearest dented vessel, and sip. You're officially a participant in one of the trickiest, stickiest, and most hilariously hazardous aspects of medieval nightlife. Cheers, and may your stomach forgive you. If you thought surviving the streets and entering the brothel was the hard part, think again. Now comes the challenge of attire. Welcome to the medieval wardrobe, a place where comfort is optional, hygiene is theoretical, and fashion is, well, let's call it adventurously practical. Here, style is dictated less by aesthetics and more by what won't fall apart before you finish your first mug of ale. Your outfit is likely whatever you rolled out of bed in, or more accurately, whatever survived last week's laundry attempt, which, in medieval terms, involved rubbing it on a rock by the river and hoping for the best. Your tunic is rough, scratchy, and possibly 2 sizes too small, or maybe 2 sizes too large, which is basically a fabric hazard zone. The sleeves flap, hems drag, and every movement threatens a tear, exposing your medieval undergarments, which are optional anyway. Hose, if you even have them, are a marvel of elasticity, or a relic of hope stitched with yarn and prayer. They sag in mysterious ways, pinch where they shouldn't, and may be riddled with holes that you only notice when someone points them out. Shoes are another adventure. If you own any, they're made of untreated leather with the support of a soggy cardboard box. Most people here walk barefoot, which means dodging puddles, sharp stones, and what you suspect might be remnants of the previous night's stew. Layering doesn't improve the situation. Cloaks flap in the wind and snag on doorways. Belts are perpetually loose or too tight. And buttons, if your tunic even has them, are either missing or sewn on upside down. One wrong move, and your entire ensemble could collapse in a pile of fabric and shame. Hats are rare, but for those brave enough to wear them, expect them to be tilted dangerously or adorned with a feather that's really just a quill from a very judgmental goose. Jewelry, you ask? Only if you brought it yourself. And even then, expect it to be stolen, pawned, or used as a makeshift bookmark by a wandering cat. Scarves, sashes, and ribbons add flair and tangling hazards in equal measure. Consider each knot a strategic decision. Undoing one requires either patience or the intervention of someone with sharp scissors and a dubious sense of judgment. The staff, of course, has mastered this chaotic sartorial landscape. The madam and her entourage glide through the room in patched dresses, worn doublets, and scarves that might once have been curtains. Every movement is deliberate. They know where the floorboards creak, how to dodge puddles, and which items of clothing will survive a brawl. Their fashion sense is entirely functional. It keeps them alive and looking slightly intimidating, while subtly asserting dominance over anyone unfortunate enough to misstep. And then there's the issue of personal hygiene, which inevitably intersects with fashion. Layers of unwashed fabric stick to the skin in unpleasant ways, carrying scents that modern noses can only faintly comprehend. You may catch glimpses of your fellow patrons, whose tunics cling with the stubbornness of medieval history itself. Lice, sweat, and a faint aroma of yesterday's stew add texture to every hem, collar, and cuff. Disasters are everywhere. Buttons pop, seams split, and hems catch in doorways. Sometimes your belt snaps mid-negotiation. Occasionally, your sleeve is snatched by a passing goose. Or worse, a patron trying to flirt with questionable results. Every wardrobe malfunction is simultaneously humiliating, hilarious, and a gentle reminder that medieval fashion was more about survival than vanity. By the time you settle into the brothel's dim candlelight, your ensemble has transformed into a unique monument to endurance. It's less about looking good and more about not tripping, not bleeding, and not attracting the attention of the house goose. Somehow, though, the chaos comes together. The tunic, the hose, the lopsided shoes, they are your armor, your uniform, and your badge of courage in this absurd, fascinating world. So take a deep breath, tug your belt tight, and remember, in the Middle Ages, fashion is less about expressing yourself and more about surviving the night, hopefully with all your toes and dignity intact. Now that you've survived the streets, the bouncer, the goat, and a wardrobe that feels like it's conspiring against you, it's time to confront the most inescapable fact of medieval life: hygiene. Or, more accurately, the lack thereof. In the brothel, cleanliness is optional, a curious suggestion, and sometimes a bargaining chip. Welcome to the grooming rituals of the Middle Ages, where soap is a rumor, water is a hazard, and bathing is considered risky. First, the shower, or, as they might have called it, standing under a rain cloud indoors while questioning your life choices, is largely a fantasy. Bathing is rare, dangerous, and socially frowned upon. People believed that washing opened the pores and let in disease. So, the less you bathed, the more protected you were. Common practice was a quick wipe with a damp cloth, or, if ambitious, splashing a few buckets of water over yourself while praying to survive both the water and the fleas it might carry. Soap exists, but it's expensive, lumpy, and often made from animal fat mixed with ash. You might find a small chunk in the corner of the room, but using it means sharing with everyone else, which is basically inviting a plague to rub your back. Many patrons choose the alternative. Scented herbs, a sprig of rosemary tucked into your tunic, or a little lavender in your hair might disguise the aroma of unwashed humanity, but only if you're optimistic and someone else isn't wearing stronger rosemary. Hair, of course, is its own adventure. Combs are scarce, lice are everywhere, and a bad day of brushing can mean more tangles than triumph. The madam might offer a quick comb out, but this usually ends with her muttering and you leaving with a braid that looks like it's been attacked by a rat. Beards are a particular hazard. Shaving requires a straight razor, candlelight, and enough courage to ignore the subtle screams coming from your reflection. A nick or cut isn't just painful, it's a festival for infection. Teeth are another story. Dental hygiene is mostly a concept whispered in monasteries and promptly forgotten elsewhere. You might chew on a twig, rinse with vinegar, or pray to avoid the inevitable toothache. For many, cavities are so common they're considered decorative. Painful, yes, but decorative. Tooth extraction is handled by the local barber surgeon, a man who doubles as the village hair cutter and general purveyor of "I hope this works" solutions. There's no anesthesia, just candlelight, a steady hand, and a prayer. Nails are, unsurprisingly, a low priority. Trimming involves scissors that may or may not have seen the wash since the last time someone attempted it, decades ago. Clipping can result in a painful nick or a minor infection, but it's worth the gamble if only to avoid scraping layers of dirt into your stew. Even clothing, your first line of defense against both chill and embarrassment, doubles as an unwitting hygiene strategy. Layers trap heat, absorb sweat, and shield you from stray debris. Unfortunately, they also trap smells, fleas, and the occasional regrettable culinary spill. Fluffing, shaking, and turning your tunic might remove a stray leaf, but it won't remove history, or the dozen other tiny inhabitants who call it home. The staff has mastered this art, moving through the brothel with a sort of practiced grace, occasionally tossing a handful of herbs or giving a quick brush of a patron's hair. But the overall message is clear. Hygiene is a negotiation. Everyone is doing their best with what little they have, and that includes whatever survives the journey from the streets to the room. By the end of the night, you'll realize that being clean is relative. You may smell faintly of rosemary, sweat, or last week's stew, but everyone else does too, and that creates a sort of communal tolerance. Grooming, in this environment, is less about vanity and more about surviving the night without being banished to the street. Or worse, being laughed at by the house cat, so accept it. In the medieval brothel, hygiene is optional, patience is mandatory, and every splash of water is a minor victory. Once you've settled in with a questionable mug of ale, it's time to explore another essential feature of the medieval brothel, the entertainment. And by entertainment, we don't mean modern jazz or a carefully curated playlist. No. Here, entertainment is a high-stakes adventure of improvisation, off-key music, and performances that somehow survive despite every law of physics, logic, and common sense. As you glance around the common room, you immediately notice the performers, a rotating cast of characters who might have been court jesters, traveling minstrels, or just someone with a lute and a reckless sense of ambition. One is juggling onions, which occasionally bounce into your lap or collide with the nearest patron. Another is plucking a single string on a lute that's missing 3 other strings and maybe a tuning peg. Somehow, the result is still called music, even if your ears might politely disagree. Over in a shadowy corner, a small troupe attempts dance. It looks choreographed at first, but upon closer inspection, it's more of an interpretive struggle against gravity. You see patrons hopping in time, or at least attempting to, while others wave mugs in the air as if conducting the rhythm. Every slip or stumble is met with laughter, shouting, or a half-hearted attempt at applause, which quickly devolves into a brawl when someone steps on someone else's toes. The energy is infectious, chaotic, and entirely unpredictable. Storytelling is also on the menu. Here, tales of heroic knights are twisted by exaggeration and a healthy dose of survival instinct. Once, a knight did battle with 3 dragons and a rabid goat. One performer announces, and the crowd nods solemnly. The story ends with everyone unsure if they've learned a lesson, witnessed a metaphor, or just narrowly avoided being hit by a flying onion. Every tale is part folklore, part cautionary tale, and part free entertainment, because patrons can't afford to pay attention otherwise. Noise is constant. Somewhere, a guest is attempting to sing along with a broken instrument, which produces a series of squeaks and groans that can only be described as enthusiastically alarming. Laughter erupts at random intervals, mixing with the clatter of mugs, the shuffle of feet, and the occasional honk from the resident goose, who clearly fancies itself the director of the show. Every sound competes for dominance, creating a sensory soup that is equal parts entertaining and exhausting. Games are sprinkled throughout the room. Dice rolls, card games, and questionable wagers keep patrons engaged and slightly terrified. The stakes are low, usually a coin, a turnip, or the promise of never speaking of the previous night, but the drama is real. Arguments break out over who rolled what, or whether someone cheated, which is technically impossible, but entirely plausible in context. Observing these skirmishes provides more entertainment than the music or dance ever could. Occasionally, the brothel offers live acts that range from skilled to absurd. A contortionist might twist into a shape resembling a human pretzel, or perhaps a rejected knightly crest. A one-stringed fiddler provides accompaniment for anyone brave enough to sing along. And the audience? A mix of locals, regulars, and strangers who are alternately cheering, groaning, or ducking stray objects hurled in excitement. Everyone participates, because in a place like this, you have no choice but to be part of the chaos. The smells of the room, the stew, the ale, the ever-present aroma of unwashed humanity add an extra layer to the entertainment. It's immersive in a way no modern theatre could ever replicate. Every sight, sound, and scent reminds you that you're not just watching a show, you're living it. Every laugh, every brawl, every squeaky note on a lute becomes part of your story. And soon you realize that surviving a night here is its own performance. By the time you sit back, slightly dazed, perhaps with a smudge on your tunic or a stray hair out of place, it hits you. This is entertainment like no other. It's loud, unpredictable, and chaotic. But somehow, amidst the disorder, it works. It's a medieval symphony of survival, absurdity, and human stubbornness. Welcome to the show, and try to enjoy it. Just watch the onions. By now, you've navigated the hallways, survived questionable stew, dodged the resident goose, and witnessed entertainment that defies both reason and physics. But now comes the real challenge of the medieval brothel: romance. Or, more accurately, negotiating affection under the ever-present shadow of fleas, lice, and general human desperation. Here, love, or whatever you call it, comes with a cost, commonly referred to as the romance tax. Unlike modern dating, there's no subtle flirting, no candlelit dinners, and certainly no polite text messages. Patrons must negotiate every interaction. A wink costs a coin. A smile might be exchanged for a turnip. And a compliment could result in an impromptu wrestling match with a goat. Every expression of interest is a transaction, every gesture a delicate dance between desire, hygiene, and survival. The staff, particularly the madam, oversees all romantic negotiations with a mix of amusement and suspicion. She's a master of human behavior, able to calculate the exact amount of coin, charm, and patience required to complete a transaction without incident. Her rules are simple: everyone pays their dues, no arguments over pricing, and never, under any circumstances, try to bribe the goose. Failure to adhere is met with a glare that could curdle milk and a swift escort to the nearest exit. In practice, romance in this environment is a chaotic blend of improvisation and endurance. Patrons approach one another with exaggerated confidence, hoping their disheveled tunics, mismatched hose, and slightly questionable breath will be overlooked. They whisper, gesture, and sometimes resort to dramatic gestures, like balancing on a barrel while offering a slightly squashed loaf of bread as a token of affection. Success is rare, but when it happens, it is celebrated with the sort of joy normally reserved for minor miracles or surviving a particularly aggressive puddle in the alley. Communication is tricky. The walls are thin, the rooms crowded, and privacy is largely an illusion. Conversations intended to be intimate are frequently interrupted by falling mugs, off-key music, or the occasional squeak from a mouse having a decidedly better night than you. Even the most skilled conversationalist must contend with the persistent background noise, the hum of ale, soaked patrons, the occasional brawl, and the ever-present goose providing unsolicited commentary. Health risks further complicate matters. In an era when disease is a constant companion, every touch, every kiss, every shared drink carries potential consequences. Patrons are acutely aware that a night of romance could result in a week of fever, rash, or worse. And yet, the desire for connection, be it fleeting, transactional, or slightly misguided, drives them forward. Love, in this context, is part adventure, part endurance test, and part gamble. Social status and reputation add another layer of complexity. Regular patrons know one another's histories, secrets, and outstanding debts. A misstep in the courtship process could be gossip fodder for weeks. The wrong compliment, the wrong glance, or the unfortunate incident involving spilled ale might brand you as a fool, a cheat, or worse, a goose magnet, which is a serious and inexplicably specific insult in these parts. Despite the chaos, there is a certain charm to this madness. Patrons laugh, improvise, and navigate the absurd rules of affection with a determination that would be impressive in any era. They negotiate their desires, manage their hygiene disasters, and try to leave the room with as much dignity as possible, often failing, but with a remarkable sense of persistence. By the end of the night, you realize that romance in the medieval brothel is less about passion and more about survival. It is a currency, a test of patience, and a subtle, constant negotiation of boundaries, both physical and social. If you emerge from the room with a smile, a coin less, and only a mild rash, consider it a triumph. Here, love may be transactional, chaotic, and occasionally hazardous, but it is, above all, human. Now that you've survived the room, the ale, and the gentle chaos of medieval romance, it's time to meet another feature of the brothel that's just as challenging as the food and the goat, the regulars. These are the patrons who have memorized every creak in the floorboards, every smell in the common room, and every trick for negotiating an extra turnip or a few more moments of privacy. Meeting them is less about socializing and more about enduring a masterclass in historical absurdity. Regulars tend to sit in the same spots night after night, as if claiming territory in a complex game of social chess. There's old Gregor, a man with more missing teeth than intact ones, who insists on giving unsolicited advice about everything. from ale quality to which herbs are best for warding off lice. He leans on his cane, which is really just a sharpened broom handle, and speaks with the gravitas of someone who has survived plagues, brawls, and 3 bad marriages. Listen carefully, because some of his wisdom is surprisingly practical. Though delivered in the middle of a story about a runaway goose and a stolen goat, then there's Maribel, the quiet one who observes everyone and says almost nothing until she decides it's time to share a story about someone who once owed her a chicken, a loaf of bread, and, inexplicably, a shoe. Her tales are long, winding, and occasionally involve accusations of witchcraft or minor acts of treason. If you nod and feign understanding, she'll tolerate your presence. If you interrupt, you may find yourself on the receiving end of a highly detailed lecture on why your shoelaces are a hazard. Conversation is rarely polite. Patrons trade rumors, grievances, and tiny victories with the sort of intensity usually reserved for epic battles. Did you hear about the bishop's nephew? Someone whispers, leaning so close you can feel the sweat in his beard. They say he tried to smuggle a goose into the tavern last week and lost. The room erupts in laughter. Or possibly in outrage. It's hard to tell. In a brothel, facts are fluid, and the line between truth, exaggeration, and outright invention is extremely flexible. Regulars are also the informal gossip network. If something happens, a new patron, a missing coin, a dispute over seating, it spreads faster than a fire in dry hay. By the time you leave, you'll know things about the town that no one would admit aloud, and yet, somehow, everyone is aware. The regulars operate like medieval Twitter, only louder, smellier, and with significantly more ale. Interaction is an endurance test. You must nod, respond, and occasionally laugh on cue. A wrong expression, a delayed chuckle, or an incorrect gesture can mark you as an outsider. Outsiders are fair game for stories, pranks, or minor harassment. If you survive the regulars' scrutiny, you've earned a sort of acceptance, an unspoken nod that says, "You can stay for tonight, but we're watching." The conversations themselves are a blend of absurdity and wisdom. Some are philosophical, reflecting on life, death, and the meaning of ale. Others are practical, advising on which herbs repel fleas, the best hiding spots for stolen turnips, or how to handle a goat in a romantic negotiation gone wrong. Even if you don't understand everything, there's a rhythm to the chatter, a cadence that tells you, this is how survival feels when combined with boredom, curiosity, and a surprisingly strong sense of community. By the end of the night, you'll realize the regulars are more than just a group of patrons. They are the heartbeat of the brothel. They set the tone, spread the stories, and ensure that every night is memorable, chaotic, and just dangerous enough to keep everyone alert. They are your guides, your entertainment, and your gentle reminder that in medieval life, human connection is as messy, unpredictable, and essential as it ever was. In their company, you learn that survival isn't just about dodging goats and avoiding bad ale. It's about listening, observing, and occasionally laughing at the absurdity of it all. By now, you've experienced the chaos of the brothel. The smells, the ale, the slightly unhinged entertainment, and the whispers of regulars swapping stories about misadventures that sound simultaneously horrifying and fascinating. But it's time to confront the heart of the matter. What exactly are you paying for? In a medieval brothel, the real cost isn't just measured in coins, it's measured in patience, nerves, and the quiet erosion of dignity. Let's start with the obvious. Money. The posted rates are vague at best, and the actual fee is negotiable depending on the time of day, your bargaining skills, and, quite often, how amusing the staff find your misadventures with the doorman or the house goose. A single coin might get you a private room, a shared mug of ale, and a faint nod from the madam. 2 coins might buy you a slightly less wobbly stool, or the privilege of being ignored for 5 uninterrupted minutes. 3 coins? Well, that's considered extravagant, and the staff may whisper about your wealth or question your sanity. But coins are only the beginning. There's the invisible currency: attention, effort, and emotional stamina. Every gesture must be measured, every movement negotiated. Lean too far into a conversation, and you risk a minor brawl. Smile too widely at the wrong patron, and you may find yourself explaining why you just complimented someone's tunic in great detail. Every interaction is a transaction, a subtle test to see if you can survive the room without embarrassment, or worse, losing your shoes to a goat, which is always a possibility. There's also the cost of risk. Think of it as an insurance premium for bodily harm, emotional stress, and sudden exposure to rogue chickens. A fall into a puddle might soak your tunic, attract a curious rat, or earn you a pointed remark from old Gregor, who has opinions about everything and everyone. Even sitting still carries peril. Chairs wobble, floors creak, and occasionally a candle falls, fire safety being more aspirational than practical. By the end of the night, the stress alone could be enough to age you a decade. Time is another hidden cost. While modern indulgences require little more than a wallet, here you invest hours. Time spent navigating hallways, negotiating tokens, dodging stray animals, and interpreting the ever-shifting rules of social interaction adds up. By the time you leave, you've worked harder than a peasant on market day and earned roughly the same satisfaction as surviving a particularly clever prank involving onions and the resident cat. There's also the toll on your senses. Your nose has endured layers of smell: sweat, spilled ale, burnt stew, and the faint but persistent tang of unwashed bodies. Your ears have adjusted to the chaotic symphony of off-key music, shouting, and disputes about the correct ownership of turnips. Your eyes have witnessed both absurd and alarming sights: mismatched shoes, costume improvisations, and occasional acts of bravery from someone attempting to juggle knives while balancing on a barrel. All of this is part of the experience, but it's also part of the cost. And finally, there's the cost to your dignity. In the medieval brothel, humility is mandatory. You'll laugh, cringe, and occasionally gasp. You might find yourself negotiating with a stranger about a turnip, or apologizing to a cat for spilling your ale. By sunrise, you'll be aware that survival here isn't glamorous. It's a delicate balance of strategy, endurance, and the quiet hope that nothing catastrophic, like the goat reclaiming its territory, happens before you leave. So, the real cost of a night in the medieval brothel is far greater than coins alone. It's measured in patience, vigilance, and courage. The willingness to survive a world where everything conspires against comfort, cleanliness, and quiet dignity. And yet, for those who endure, it's a kind of victory. You leave not only with stories and scars, but with the knowledge that you survived the unpredictable chaos of medieval human nature, and, in doing so, gained a kind of absurd, unforgettable wisdom. By now, you've endured the streets, the bouncer, the questionable stew, and the relentless gaze of the regulars. You might think that stepping behind a door in the brothel finally gives you a moment of privacy. Think again. In the medieval brothel, privacy is less a guarantee and more a polite suggestion. One the walls, the floorboards, and the ever-watchful animals are quick to ignore. The doors themselves are barely functional, a plank of wood, sometimes hanging by a single hinge, and often warped by years of weather, movement, or someone leaning against it while complaining about the soup, marks the threshold. When you close it, expect a draft, a creak, and the faint squeak of a rat or mouse somewhere nearby. The door does little to shield, sound, smell, or misadventure. Voices carry, footsteps echo, and what happens inside is rarely confined. The walls are thin, so thin, in fact, that every cough, sneeze, and whispered negotiation can be overheard. If someone outside the room shouts, laughs, or drops a mug, you'll hear it as though it's part of the scene unfolding in your own space. The concept of private conversation is mostly theoretical. Your secrets are not so much hidden as suspended in the air, accessible to anyone within shouting distance, which in this brothel is practically everyone. Even within the room, the layout works against discretion. Beds, usually straw-stuffed and questionable, sit close to tables, chairs, and whatever else survived the last renovation or disaster. There's no luxury of a private nook, no soundproof partitions, and certainly no locks strong enough to resist a determined goat. And the animals, they patrol constantly. Cats jump onto tables, dogs wander through, and the ever-present goose has a talent for choosing the worst possible moment to honk. Personal items fare little better. Your mug, plate, or any tokens of currency might be borrowed, inspected, or simply displaced by a more assertive patron or a stray rodent. There's little to no expectation of security. Someone might sit in your chair, take your seat by accident, or design, and there's nothing to stop them. Negotiation becomes part of the game. Reclaiming your space without causing a brawl, and ideally without spilling ale on anyone's shoe. Even clothing isn't safe. Cloaks hang over doors or draped on chairs, vulnerable to theft or mischief. Belts and scarves can be tugged or borrowed, often as part of some misguided joke. You quickly learn that the rules of personal space here are flexible and often decided by whoever is fastest, strongest, or has the best aim with a turnip. Despite all this, the brothel thrives on a kind of communal chaos. The lack of privacy creates a unique rhythm. You become aware of everyone's presence, their stories, their triumphs, and their embarrassments. This intimacy, forced, awkward, and often pungent, breeds an odd camaraderie. It's a shared experience, one where everyone is equally exposed to mishaps, judgment, and the occasional flying stew ladle. Privacy is not impossible, but it is fleeting. A simple moment of reflection, adjusting a tunic, sipping ale, or attempting a quiet conversation is constantly interrupted by creaks, shouts, and the undeniable reality that the walls have ears, and the animals, of course, have noses, paws, and an uncanny sense of timing. By the time the night winds down, you realize that privacy in the medieval brothel is less about isolation and more about skill. The ability to navigate, negotiate, and survive while fully aware that nothing you do is ever truly unseen or unheard. Every glance, every word, every minor misstep is part of the performance. And in surviving it, you earn a subtle, absurd kind of respect, not just from the staff or regulars, but from history itself. So, behind closed doors, remember this. You may feel alone, but you are never truly alone. Every creak, whisper, and honk reminds you that the medieval brothel is a shared theatre of chaos, and your audience is everywhere. Privacy is a suggestion, survival is mandatory, and endurance, it turns out, is priceless. Now that you've survived the chaos of the brothel's common room, the thin walls, and the relentless attention of the regulars, it's time to confront another, far more delicate challenge: safety. And in the medieval brothel, safety isn't just about dodging the floorboards, rogue goats, or a flying mug of ale. It's about navigating the unpredictable hazards of intimacy, disease, and the inventive, sometimes downright frightening, attempts at birth control. In this era, contraception is a mix of rumor, superstition, and trial and error experimentation, mostly weighted toward error. Herbs are the most common tool. Rue, pennyroyal, or silphium, if you're lucky, are steeped, dried, or crushed in hopes of preventing consequences that might appear weeks later. The instructions are vague, occasionally contradictory, and never guaranteed. One patron swears by a sprig of rosemary tucked into the waistband. Another insists on a ritual involving crossing your fingers, whispering the name of Saint something or other, and avoiding the chicken. Success rates are unknown, and side effects may include nausea, fainting, or mild hallucinations. It's the medieval lottery of reproduction. Other methods are stranger still. Sponges soaked in vinegar, concoctions brewed by local apothecaries, and charms worn around the ankle are all in circulation. If they work, congratulations, you've dodged biology. If they fail, well, at least you have a story or a crisis. Sometimes both. The staff is aware of these dangers, and they handle them with a combination of humor and grim pragmatism. Advice is given sparingly, often accompanied by a pointed glance or a warning about what happens when someone ignores it. Disease is another constant threat. The brothel is, by design and circumstance, a hotspot for infections both minor and severe. So-called venereal diseases roam freely, carried by patrons who survived, ignored, or were simply unaware of their condition. Infections that modern medicine can handle with a pill could be fatal or disfiguring here. There's no discreet clinic or sympathetic doctor, only the madam's guidance, herbal poultices, and the hope that your immune system is both strong and forgiving. Every encounter carries a hidden cost: pleasure, adventure, and a possible fever or rash. Welcome to medieval risk assessment. And yet, the human spirit persists. Patrons and staff alike navigate this world with resilience and creativity. Flirting, negotiation, and personal hygiene become forms of strategy. Everyone knows the rules: never assume consent lasts, never ignore the signs of infection, and always have a plausible excuse ready if questioned by another patron or the ever-watchful madam. Even minor breaches of etiquette or safety can result in embarrassment, a stiff fine, or a very public lesson in humility. The stakes are high, and everyone plays carefully. Beyond birth control and disease, other safety measures take bizarre forms. Spells, charms, and whispered prayers are as much a part of the brothel's nightly routine as ale and storytelling. Patrons might tie a piece of string around a finger, hide a pebble in a pocket, or murmur protective incantations before a romantic negotiation. None of it is scientifically sound, but it adds a layer of ritual, comfort, and, occasionally, comedy to the proceedings. By the end of the night, survival is about more than just avoiding the goat, the spilled ale, or a misjudged step on the creaky floor. It's about awareness, adaptability, and understanding the rules, both real and imagined, that govern the brothel. You've learned to navigate conversations, flirtations, and bodily risks with a mixture of courage, humor, and strategic hesitation. So, as you step carefully toward the next room or prepare for an intimate encounter, remember, safety in the medieval brothel is relative. Birth control is a suggestion, disease is a gamble, and your wits are your best protection. Endurance, observation, and a touch of luck are essential. If you survive the night without incident, or at least without scandal, you've earned more than just a story. You've earned a medal in absurd historical survival. By now, you've survived the chaos of the brothel's halls, the unpredictable entertainment, and the delicate dance of medieval romance. But don't get too comfortable. In the medieval world, survival isn't just about dodging goats, spilled ale, or rogue turnips. It's about navigating the constant threat of illness. Welcome to the health hazards of the medieval brothel, where every cough, scratch, and sneeze is a potential career-ending, life-altering event. Let's start with the obvious. The plague. It isn't always present, but when it is, it lurks silently among the patrons. Medieval Europe's understanding of disease is rudimentary at best. They attribute illness to bad air, divine displeasure, or a misalignment of the four humours. You, however, know better, or at least hope you do. A simple scratch from a rat, a cough from a drunken regular, or a contaminated mug of ale could spell weeks of fever, rashes, or worse. Every sneeze in the room is a minor emergency, and every sniffle is treated with a mixture of fear, superstition, and herbal guesses. Lice and fleas are omnipresent. You feel them immediately, crawling along your arms, beneath your tunic, or hidden in the straw mattress that passes for a bed. Scratching becomes both a reflex and a form of meditation, a constant reminder that your personal space is only theoretical. Every time you stop, the little creatures remind you who's truly in charge. Patience, deep breathing, and strategic avoidance are your only defenses. The air itself is a hazard. Smoke from tallow candles, combined with the smells of unwashed bodies, stale ale, and whatever the cook is experimenting with, creates an olfactory assault that can leave you lightheaded. Breathing requires careful strategy. Inhale slowly. Avoid the corner near the stew, and pray that your sinuses survive the experience. Even an innocent sniff can trigger coughing fits, potentially spreading whatever invisible menace is floating nearby. Food, as you've discovered, is another risk. The pottage simmers for days, sometimes weeks, and though it nourishes, it may also harbor bacteria, mold, or even small, unexpected critters. Bread is dense, sometimes fortified with sawdust or acorns, and occasionally questionable in origin, and the ale, while safer than water, is still weakly fermented and served in mugs that have seen generations of use. Each bite and sip is a gamble. Will it sustain you or send you stumbling toward the chamber pot in a feverish haze? And let's not forget the human element. Patrons bring their own collections of germs, parasites, and mysteries. A shared mug, a forgotten hand, or a sneeze in your direction can initiate a chain reaction. Staff members, despite their best intentions, are carriers of both wisdom and disease. The madam may know how to manage debts, disputes, and unruly animals, but she can't sanitize every mug, broom, or stray cat. Your health is, ultimately, your responsibility. Even minor injuries can be catastrophic. A cut from a broken chair, a scrape on the way to the privy, or a stumble on a wet floor can become infected in hours. Without modern medicine, even small wounds are treated with poultices, prayers, and hope. A bandage is often nothing more than a cloth strip, a whispered blessing, and the faintest optimism. By the end of the night, survival is not just about wit, luck, and caution. It's about accepting that the environment itself is an adversary. Fleas, lice, plague, mold, and questionable stew all conspire in ways that would make a modern germaphobe retire from life entirely. Endurance here is measured not just in coins or courage, but in the number of times you successfully avoid a potentially fatal sneeze, scratch, or spill. So, as you navigate the next room, sip your ale carefully and adjust your tunic against the creeping heat of body and candle, remember. In the medieval brothel, the greatest hazards are invisible, relentless, and often hilarious in retrospect. Surviving the night is a triumph of resilience, observation, and slightly reckless bravery, a skill you'll carry with you, if only to appreciate modern plumbing and hand sanitizer. If you've survived the hallways, the ale, the stew, and the whispers of seasoned patrons, congratulations. You're now about to meet some of the most unexpected regulars in the medieval brothel, the pets. Yes, pets. And yes, one of them is almost certainly a goat. In a world without zoning laws, health codes, or common sense, animals wander freely, asserting authority over space, resources, and occasionally your dignity. The goat is the most notorious. Its presence is neither decorative nor ceremonial. This is a working goat with attitude, likely inherited from a former patron, abandoned by a farmer, or smuggled in by someone with a fondness for chaos. It wanders the hallways with the air of a self-appointed manager, inspecting patrons, nudging unattended mugs, and occasionally deciding that someone's shoe looks like an acceptable snack. If you accidentally step on its tail, or worse, its sacred space, you will quickly learn the importance of negotiation, humility, and rapid retreat. Cats roam the establishment as well, elegantly, or sometimes disastrously, ignoring the human drama while patrolling for crumbs, mice, and the occasional unwary patron. Their eyes gleam in the candlelight, calculating the risks of every jump and landing. They've perfected the art of appearing unconcerned while actually assessing every person in the room for potential contributions to their personal stash of food or warmth. Unlike the goat, they are subtle, but no less demanding of respect. Dogs, if present, are often a mix of street smarts and scavenger instincts. They weave through the legs of patrons, sniffing pockets, investigating mugs, and occasionally barking in response to a particularly loud sneeze or insult. Their presence adds both a layer of chaos and a slight chance of emotional comfort. Assuming you're willing to trust an animal in a room where humans are already unpredictable, birds are a wild card. Chickens, pigeons, and sometimes even a duck or two are permitted to wander, roost, and occasionally contribute to the olfactory tapestry of the brothel. Their movements are unpredictable. A pigeon might alight on a nearby beam and observe silently, or a chicken might decide to explore your lap in search of crumbs. The madam has long since accepted that controlling their behavior is impossible, and that the occasional squawk or cluck adds to the atmosphere, chaotic, dangerous, and distinctly medieval. The presence of animals isn't just for color or amusement. They serve practical purposes too. Cats chase mice, dogs deter intruders. And the goat, well, the goat is mostly a morale booster and a cautionary tale. Its unpredictable behavior forces patrons to stay alert, adapt, and occasionally sprint across a room to avoid a sudden headbutt or a stolen hat. Surviving the night without an incident involving an animal is considered a minor triumph, worth bragging about in hushed tones the next day. Patrons learn quickly. Animals are part of the social fabric here. They understand the hierarchy of the brothel, often better than new guests do. Step too boldly, and you risk a nudge, a scratch, or a direct confrontation with a goat whose personality far outweighs its size. Move too timidly, and you invite the cats to inspect you, the dog to sniff you, and the chickens to rearrange your personal space entirely. By the end of the night, you develop an acute awareness of four-legged, clawed, and hooved life forms, learning to navigate corridors, chairs, and beds with the finesse of a trapeze artist. You respect the goat's authority, accommodate the cat's inspections, and politely ignore the dog's inquisitive noses. Somehow, the chaos is comforting. It reminds you that, in the medieval brothel, survival isn't just about evading human pitfalls. It's about coexisting with the creatures who, by right of habit and stubbornness, rule this peculiar ecosystem. So, as you settle in for the night, mindful of every step and wary of every curious snout, remember this: the goat is not your enemy. The cat is not your friend. The dog is neutral, and the birds are omniscient. Navigating their company requires patience, tact, and a healthy respect for history's most unpredictable patrons. Welcome to the wild, whimsical, and slightly terrifying world of brothel pets. By now, you've survived the hallways, the stew, the ale, the gossip, and the resident goat. You might think you're finally safe, or at least that you've reached a point of predictable chaos. Think again. In the medieval brothel, law is a curious concept, and order is even stranger. Enter the sheriff, or, more accurately, someone who resembles the sheriff, equipped with authority, suspicion, and the occasional poorly polished club. The sheriff, or his medieval equivalent, is a rotating figure, often appearing without warning. His job is to enforce the law, which in practice means ensuring that no one is plotting rebellion, cheating the Lord, or spilling too much ale. He strides in with an air of authority, often wearing a hat 2 sizes too big, a tunic caked with mud, and an expression that says, "I might know what I'm doing, but don't test me." His presence instantly shifts the energy in the room. Laughter is replaced by nervous glances. Juggling stops mid-flight, and the goose goes silent, temporarily at least. Inspection begins. The sheriff moves slowly, deliberately, checking mugs, counting coins, and peering into corners where patrons and staff alike hope nothing incriminating is happening. Every footstep creaks ominously, as if announcing your sins to the universe. You clutch your token and murmur prayers, hoping the sheriff is distracted by someone else, preferably a patron whose hat looks suspiciously like a tax collector's ledger. Patrons react differently. Regulars greet him with respect, offering explanations for spilled ale or a missing turnip, while newcomers scramble to look casual. No one wants to admit to minor indiscretions, a wager gone wrong, a borrowed coin, or a slight disagreement with the goat. Every misstep is a potential fine, punishment, or public humiliation. The sheriff might decide to impose order by confiscating a coin, issuing a warning, or simply giving you a glare so potent it can be felt through your tunic. Rules in the brothel are flexible. Some are official: no weapons, no fights, no open theft. But most are situational. The sheriff navigates this ambiguity with a combination of authority and arbitrary judgment. If he sees something he dislikes, you may be reprimanded. If he misses it, congratulations, you've passed inspection. Observing him is like watching a cat patrol a room full of mice. Unpredictably effective and mildly terrifying, law enforcement here is as much performance as procedure. Executing authority requires drama, a loud voice, and the occasional demonstration of power. Patrons watch, waiting for a slip-up or an opportunity to turn a minor oversight into a story they'll retell for weeks. Sometimes, the sheriff is bribed, distracted, or simply bemused by the chaos. Other times, he becomes the central figure in a brief, terrifying tableau. Mugs fly, patrons argue, the goat becomes involved, and somewhere, a lute string snaps. By the time the sheriff departs, the brothel breathes a collective sigh of relief. Patrons resume their activities, laughter returns, and the goat wanders freely once more, blissfully ignoring laws that humans take far too seriously. But his presence lingers, a reminder that, in medieval society, authority is unpredictable, enforcement is inconsistent, and chaos is always just a few footsteps away. For you, the newcomer, surviving the sheriff's visit, is a test of observation, patience, and luck. You've learned when to bow, when to laugh, when to duck, and when to pretend you were never involved in the minor scandals now under scrutiny. The lesson is simple. In a medieval brothel, law is a shadow, disorder is a constant, and surviving both is a skill worth more than any coin. So, as you settle back into the dim candlelight, reflect on your narrow escape. The sheriff may return, another authority may wander in, and the balance of order and chaos will continue its delicate dance. In this place, survival depends not just on cunning, charm, or courage. It depends on understanding that law and disorder are two sides of the same coin, and your role is to navigate them with agility, humor, and just enough humility to avoid becoming the evening's cautionary tale. By now, you've survived the streets, the bouncer, the ale, the stew, the regulars, and even the occasional goose intervention. You might think you've reached the point of calm, perhaps even comfort. Think again. In the medieval brothel, midnight is a special hour when chaos escalates, mistakes multiply, and everything that could go wrong suddenly seems to conspire against you. Welcome to the world of midnight mishaps. It begins innocuously enough. A patron, slightly overconfident from a few mugs of ale, leans back in a chair that wobbles as if it's rehearsing for a stunt. Nearby, the cook, or someone pretending to be a cook, bumps into a table, sending a hunk of bread flying across the room like a missile of crust. In one corner, a lute string snaps mid-strum, producing a note so shrill it startles the cat, who, in turn, leaps onto the nearest table, scattering mugs and tokens in every direction. The first rule of midnight mishaps is this: nothing stays where it belongs. Ale spills, coins roll into corners, and the stray turnip you thought you could save for later becomes a projectile in a minor altercation. Patrons yelp, the madam curses, and the goat wanders into the chaos, head-butting anyone who looks like they might be winning a dispute. By the time you realize the chaos has reached its peak, it's already part of the entertainment. Brawls are a common feature. A minor disagreement over a chair, a mug, or the proper pronunciation of the local lord's name escalates rapidly. Hands fly, tempers flare, and someone inevitably trips over a stray shoe, or worse, the ever-present straw mattress. The rules are simple: dodge, apologize, and keep moving. Failure to do so can result in a bruised ego, a bruised arm, or both. If you're lucky, you only get covered in spilled ale, stew, or dust. Animals naturally love midnight. The cat takes advantage of the chaos, jumping onto heads, tables, and laps indiscriminately. The goose, a master of timing, chooses exactly the right moment to honk, a note so loud it could be classified as a public health hazard. And the goat, as if sensing opportunity, maneuvers through the melee with surprising grace, knocking over anyone foolish enough to block its path. Objects themselves become hazards. A candle tips, sending wax onto the floor, or worse, someone's sleeve. A chair leg breaks under the weight of someone leaning too far in amusement or frustration. Mugs collide, food flies, and the occasional shoe goes missing, perhaps claimed by the goat, perhaps misplaced in the excitement. Everything conspires to test your reflexes, patience, and ability to maintain dignity. Patrons themselves contribute to the disorder. Stories are shouted, rumors are debated, and accidental insults fly faster than a juggler's onions. Laughter erupts mid-argument, and a minor misunderstanding can escalate into a full-scale dramatic performance. Everyone is simultaneously a participant and an observer, and no one truly knows where the line between entertainment and disaster lies. By the end of midnight, surviving is an accomplishment. You've avoided being hit by flying objects, navigated the brawls, and dodged the goat's unpredictable headbutt. Your ale may be spilt, your tunic dusty, and your shoes damp, but you are intact, and that is the true measure of success. In the medieval brothel, midnight is not quiet, not safe, and certainly not predictable. It is an hour of heightened risk, absurd comedy, and survival lessons in miniature. By enduring it, you learn the rhythms of the place, the timing of mishaps, the patterns of brawls, and the subtle cues of patrons, staff, and animals alike. You become attuned to the chaos, and in that attunement, you find a strange kind of mastery. So, as the clock approaches the early hours, remember, mishaps are inevitable, but survival is an art. Navigate with caution, wit, and just enough humor to remind yourself that in this world, disaster is not a possibility. It's a nightly performance. And tonight, you are the audience, the actor, and, if you're careful, the survivor. If you've survived the streets, the bouncer, the ale, the stew, the entertainment, the midnight mishaps, and of course the goat, congratulations, you've made it to morning, or at least something resembling morning in the medieval brothel. But don't exhale just yet. The dawn brings a unique set of challenges: the lingering chaos, the smells, the hangovers, and the quiet, insistent realization that surviving the night was only half the battle. The first thing you notice is the smell. It's a blend of ale, stale stew, unwashed humanity, and the faintly accusatory odor of straw that has seen far too many disasters. Your own body is a battlefield. Clothing damp with sweat or spilled ale, hair in a state that defies both gravity and hygiene, and an inexplicable ache in your joints that wasn't there yesterday. Even the mattress seems to grumble under your weight, as if scolding you for daring to rest on it. You stir carefully, testing the waters of consciousness. Each movement reminds you of the night's misadventures, the near collisions with the goat, the flying mugs, the improvised brawls, and the mysterious squish underfoot that you choose not to identify. Breakfast, if you're lucky enough to receive any, is a token affair. Pottage that's thicker and more suspicious than it was the night before, and bread so hard it doubles as a weapon in case of sudden disputes. Ale may still be available, though your stomach politely refuses it after last night's enthusiasm. The morning light reveals the full scope of the brothel's aftermath. Chairs are overturned, mugs are scattered, and the floors are a patchwork of straw, spilled food, and the remnants of whatever adventures occurred in the dark. Patrons nurse bruises, scratches, and delicate reputations. Conversations resume, but now tinged with the honesty of hindsight and the muted groans of discomfort. Every misstep, every moment of overconfidence now seems larger in the bright light of morning. Regrets surface quickly. Perhaps it was the decision to accept a second mug of ale, or the choice to argue with old Gregor about the proper pronunciation of the mayor's name. Maybe it was leaning too far back in a chair, stepping on a turnip in the dark, or misjudging the goat's territorial instincts. Each memory is a lesson, a reminder that medieval survival isn't about heroics. It's about humility, caution, and occasional quick thinking. Realizations follow closely behind. You understand, in a visceral, aching way, why patrons spend hours navigating etiquette, negotiating space, and respecting the authority of staff, animals, and tradition alike. You appreciate the subtle choreography required to sip ale without disaster, to converse without offending, and to move through the space without attracting the goat's wrath. The brothel is a microcosm of medieval life itself, chaotic, unpredictable, occasionally terrifying, and oddly compelling. Despite everything, there's a strange satisfaction in survival. You made it through the night, you avoided catastrophic injuries, and your wits, though battered, remain intact. You have stories, lessons, and memories that, while unpleasant at the time, will serve you well in the abstract future, where indoor plumbing and beds that don't double as ecosystems exist. There is pride in your endurance, humor in the absurdity, and a faint warmth in knowing you navigated the chaos without becoming part of it permanently. By the time you finally step outside, sunlight in your eyes and the street below waiting to greet you, you take a deep breath of air that's mercifully free of straw, spilled ale, and rogue onions. You reflect on the night, the lessons learned, and the small victories. A mug retrieved, a chair avoided, a goat appeased. The medieval brothel, for all its danger, disorder, and surprises, has taught you more about resilience, human behavior, and the art of improvisation than any modern adventure could hope to. So, as you leave, groggy, aching, and possibly still sticky, carry with you a quiet pride. You survived the night. You learned the rules, the risks, and the subtle art of navigating absurdity. And while your modern self may never face such trials again, the lessons linger. Patience, observation, and humor are timeless, and sometimes the best way to start the day is by surviving the chaos that came before. Congratulations. You've survived the night, the ale, the stew, the goat, the broken furniture, the unpredictable entertainment, and the questionable hygiene. You've navigated brawls, dodged flying turnips, and perhaps even made it through a minor romantic negotiation without disaster. Now, all that remains is the final trial, the walk of shame. Exiting the medieval brothel is a delicate art, equal parts endurance, grace, and careful avoidance of both human and animal hazards. First, the hallway. What seemed manageable in the dark now stretches before you like an obstacle course designed by someone who enjoys chaos. The floorboards creak, wobble, and occasionally shift under your weight, reminding you that gravity and architecture are merciless partners. One false step, and you risk tumbling into a stray chair, a discarded mug, or the omnipresent straw that has claimed more casualties than anyone cares to count. Step carefully and move swiftly, keeping one eye on the madam, who observes all exits with the subtle intensity of a general inspecting her troops. The animals make their presence known immediately. The goat, sensing your vulnerability, pads along beside you with deliberate curiosity. Its eyes gleam with mischief, or perhaps judgment, as it nudges your heel, testing your resolve. The cats weave between your legs, sniffing for crumbs or any unattended coinage. And somewhere, a dog barks at the distant chaos of the street beyond, adding to the cacophony that accompanies every step. You've learned to anticipate their movements, to sidestep, and if necessary, to negotiate in low whispers with a stray feline, promising it nothing but survival. The patrons, too, play a role in your exit. Regulars linger near the door, exchanging last-minute stories, finishing their mugs, and offering sharp glances. They've seen newcomers like you attempt the exit countless times. Some nod in silent sympathy, understanding the peril you face. Others smirk, amused by your tentative steps and the slight tremor in your posture. If you stumble, spill your ale, or step on someone's toe, the result is immediate. Laughter, exclamations, and a new story for the morning. Lighting is a factor, though not in the way you expect. The dim candlelight that guided your way last night now reveals every hazard. Spilled stew, uneven boards, and the occasional pile of straw that threatens to entangle your feet. Shadows play tricks on your eyes, and every flicker reminds you that the brothel is less a place and more a living obstacle course. Focus becomes a survival tool. One misjudged step could mean another encounter with the goat, or worse, a collision with a fellow patron who is themselves testing the limits of balance and patience. The final step through the doorway is the most symbolic. Beyond lies the street, the world of sunlight, fresh air, and relative safety, but only if you've survived the brothel's gauntlet intact. The cool morning air greets you with relief. Washing away the claustrophobic warmth of the interior, you breathe deeply, savoring the scent of open sky, distant livestock, and yes, the faint, lingering aroma of the night you survived. Every step outside is a victory, a reaffirmation that you've endured the chaos and emerged unscathed, mostly. And yet, there's the subtle, inescapable weight of embarrassment. Your hair is tousled, your tunic may be damp or smudged, and your dignity, if it survived the night, is fragile. Every passerby on the street, whether a neighbor, a merchant, or an unsuspecting traveler, might catch a glimpse of you and instantly assign some story to your night. It's the medieval walk of shame, not punishment exactly, but a quiet acknowledgement of all that has occurred. And a reminder that in this world, reputation is as slippery as spilled ale. By the time you reach the edge of the district, the ordeal ends. You've survived every hazard, learned the rules, and navigated the absurd, chaotic ecosystem of the medieval brothel. Your reward is simple: the safety of the open street, the chance to reflect on the night's lessons, and the quiet knowledge that you endured what few dare to attempt. The walk of shame, for all its discomfort, is a testament to resilience, wit, and the extraordinary ability to survive human and animal chaos. By the time you've completed your precarious walk of shame, survived the goat, the spilled ale, and every obstacle inside, you might think your ordeal is over. Think again. In the medieval brothel, survival isn't just about escaping physical chaos. It's about surviving the social aftermath. Welcome to the gossip mill, the medieval equivalent of social media, rumor networks, and subtle judgment all rolled into one relentless force. Here, reputation is fragile, and every misstep is a story waiting to be told. The moment you step onto the street, you are no longer just a survivor. You are now a subject. Patrons and staff alike have long memories. Every stumble, every spilled drink, every awkward encounter with the goat or a fellow guest has been observed, catalogued, and filed away for future retelling. By dawn, your actions have become public knowledge, narrated in exaggerated detail by anyone with a penchant for storytelling and a flair for drama. Regulars are your primary commentators. They know the rules, the layout, and every prior misadventure that has unfolded within the walls. If you're new, you're automatically fascinating. Did you see the newcomer spill his ale into the stew? Someone whispers. And then step on Gregor's shoe? Another adds, I think he argued with the cat. The embellishments begin immediately, transforming small mistakes into epic tales of heroism, misfortune, or outright absurdity. Even the staff participates in the gossip mill, with the madam acting as both gatekeeper and storyteller. She carefully chooses which tales to share, often highlighting your mistakes to the delight of other patrons. A minor faux pas might be recounted with grandiose language. A slip on the floor becomes a triumph of gravity over human pride. A whispered negotiation gone wrong becomes a saga of misplaced affection, misunderstood intentions, and the subtle wrath of the goat. The spread of gossip is rapid. Medieval towns are tight-knit, and word travels fast, especially when it involves scandal, entertainment, or dramatic failure. By mid-morning, news of your exploits, your bravery, your clumsiness, or your slightly panicked encounters with stray animals is circulating among neighbors, merchants, and anyone with a vested interest in gossip. Your actions are dissected, embellished, and reinterpreted, often without your knowledge. A tale that began as I tripped over a chair might morph into. He performed an elaborate floor dance, narrowly avoiding disaster and the wrath of the entire goat population. This network has consequences. Reputation affects future interactions, social standing, and, in some cases, your personal safety. If you've embarrassed someone or accidentally insulted the wrong regular, you may find yourself the subject of jokes, minor vendettas, or deliberate pranks. Conversely, surviving a particularly chaotic night with composure, or at least with your dignity mostly intact, earns respect, subtle admiration, and a place in the unofficial hierarchy of the brothel. The gossip mill also functions as a communal memory. It preserves lessons for future patrons, highlights patterns of behavior to avoid, and ensures that newcomers are properly oriented to the rules of the space. In a world without newspapers or modern media, these tales are both entertainment and survival guide, transmitted orally with flair, exaggeration, and the occasional dramatic pause for effect. By the end of the morning, you've realized that surviving the physical challenges was only half the battle. The gossip mill ensures that your night lives on, in stories, whispers, and exaggerated retellings, shaping your place in the local lore. Every step, every word, and every action is remembered, analyzed, and transformed into narrative gold or cautionary tales. In the medieval brothel, reputation is as fragile as a spilled mug of ale, and gossip is the currency of survival. Your success is measured not only by how well you navigated the chaos inside, but by how your story is remembered, retold, and interpreted afterward. The gossip mill is relentless, unforgiving, and endlessly entertaining, and you've now become a part of its living, breathing narrative. By now, you've survived the brothel's chaos, the goat, spilled ale, midnight mishaps, gossip, and the walk of shame. But one question lingers in your mind, as persistent as a stray feather in a hay mattress. Who comes back here, and why? The answer, as you'll discover, is a strange mix of practicality, habit, and sheer stubbornness. A blend that would baffle any modern sense of logic or taste. The first group of return customers is the loyal regulars. These are the people who know every creak in the floor, every shadow in the hall, and every idiosyncrasy of the staff. They return because, in a world without creature comforts, predictability is a luxury. They know what to expect from the goat, the cat, the drunken brawls, and the pottage. For them, the chaos is familiar, almost comforting, a nightly ritual in which they are experts, and the uncertainties are mostly contained. Next are the seekers of companionship. Some patrons come back not for food or ale, nor even for the brothel's notorious luxury accommodations, but for human connection. In an era where loneliness is a constant companion, these visitors find solace in conversation, storytelling, and the simple act of being seen. The walls may be thin, the smells questionable, and privacy nearly non-existent, but the presence of other humans, fellow adventurers in absurdity, creates a strange sense of belonging. They return for the shared experience, for a night where social rules are relaxed and judgment is mitigated by everyone's collective survival instincts. Curiosity-driven patrons form another contingent. They come once, perhaps twice, fascinated by the chaos and the stories they've heard. Some arrive with bravado, only to discover that nothing in the medieval brothel is as glamorous as legend suggests. Yet the strange allure, the unpredictable performances, the roaming animals, and the human drama draws them back despite their better judgment. There's a thrill in testing your nerves, negotiating with the madam, and seeing if the night can outdo its own legend. Then there are the practical-minded visitors who return because, frankly, it's warm inside. Medieval winters are merciless, damp, and filled with drafts that seep through wooden walls and poorly sealed windows. The brothel, with its persistent candlelight, ale-fueled warmth, and chaotic energy, becomes a haven. Some patrons endure the smells, the animals, and the occasional flying turnip simply because a heated room, even if fraught with risk, is a rare commodity. They are strategic, pragmatic, and unashamed. Lastly, you encounter the hopelessly addicted. These are the individuals who have discovered that the brothel offers a distraction, an escape, or, in some mysterious way, a form of entertainment that their mundane lives cannot provide. They return night after night, not necessarily for the ale, not entirely for the romance, but for the unfolding drama itself. Every spill, argument, and mishap becomes part of their ongoing story. They are observers, participants, and chroniclers rolled into one, finding meaning and amusement in the disorder. Returning patrons interact in a delicate ecosystem. They share stories, warn newcomers, and navigate the complex hierarchy of the brothel. They understand the subtle codes, where the safest chairs are, which staff members can be bribed with a turnip, and which animals are territorial. Their familiarity allows them to thrive while others stumble, creating a rhythm and continuity amid the chaos. By the end of the night, or rather, the morning, return customers are an essential part of the brothel's ecosystem. They provide stability, stories, and context, ensuring that every visit is richer, every encounter more layered, and every mishap more entertaining. They come back because it's familiar, because it's chaotic, and because, despite everything, surviving the night gives them a story worth retelling. In the medieval brothel, repetition isn't dull, it's a badge of experience, a mark of resilience, and an acknowledgement that, somehow, the madness is worth enduring. Now that you've navigated the alleys, dodged the bouncer, endured the ale, survived the stew, entertained the regulars, negotiated the goat, and escaped the gossip mill, it's time to reflect. Could you actually survive a night in a medieval brothel? The answer is as complex as the chaos itself, an intricate tapestry of luck, wit, resilience, and a touch of insanity. First, consider the environment. The brothel is a microcosm of medieval unpredictability. Floors creak, chairs wobble, candles flicker dangerously close to flammable hay, and the walls are thin enough that every whisper, sneeze, and scandalous story is shared with the room. Add to that the animals, the cat, the dog, the ever-present goat, and the chaos multiplies. Navigating this landscape requires awareness, agility, and the uncanny ability to predict the movements of both humans and beasts. One wrong step, one misjudged glance, or one poorly timed laugh can turn a simple night into a full-scale disaster. Then there's the social calculus. Patrons are unpredictable, staff are vigilant, and regulars know the unwritten rules of etiquette better than anyone. A newcomer risks embarrassment, minor injuries, and becoming the subject of endless tales retold in the hallways and streets. To survive, you must blend confidence with humility, charm with caution, and improvisation with observation. Negotiating conversations, gestures, and even seating arrangements is as critical as dodging the goat or avoiding spilled ale. Health hazards compound the challenge. Fleas, lice, and the occasional mysterious rash are all part of the nightly package, along with the ever-present risk of disease. A scratch from a floorboard, a sip from a shared mug, or a minor collision with another patron can trigger consequences that last days, if not longer. Surviving the night requires a balance of courage and prudence, a respect for personal space, and a willingness to negotiate every interaction with care. Your physical endurance is tested alongside your social skills, creating a holistic challenge of medieval proportions. Add to this the chaotic entertainment, the unpredictable meals, and the general absurdity of the environment. The music may be off-key, the dancing may be hazardous, and the stew may harbor unknown ingredients. Even your senses are tested. Smell, sight, and hearing must constantly adapt to the onslaught of stimuli. From shouting patrons to rogue animals to the subtle, ever-present tang of medieval life, your ability to process, prioritize, and react determines whether you leave intact or covered in ale and mud. Yet, despite the hazards, there's a strange allure. Surviving the night gives you stories, skills, and a sense of accomplishment. You learn patience, resilience, and the art of improvisation. You discover how to navigate unpredictable social hierarchies, maintain your balance in chaotic environments, and coexist with humans, animals, and the unexpected consequences of both. There's pride in endurance, humor in survival, and a unique satisfaction in knowing you faced a challenge few would dare. So, could you survive a night in a medieval brothel? Perhaps, if you are clever, cautious, and lucky. Perhaps not, if you are faint of heart, distracted, or underestimate the goat. Survival requires a combination of skill, adaptability, and a willingness to embrace absurdity. Those who endure are not simply patrons. They are participants in a living, breathing theater of chaos. They leave with stories, scars, and wisdom about the unpredictable nature of human and animal behavior in a world without modern comforts. As you reflect, remember this. Surviving isn't just about avoiding physical hazards or social missteps. It's about embracing the unpredictability, finding humor in disaster, and navigating a world where patience, observation, and wit are as essential as shoes, or at least as essential as shoes that haven't been stolen by a goat. If you make it through, you emerge wiser, braver, and forever changed by the experience. The medieval brothel is a test, a theater, and a classroom all at once. And tonight, if you survived it in spirit, you've passed. At this point, you've survived alleys, bouncers, ale, stew, gossip, rogue animals, and a night of chaos that would exhaust even the most seasoned adventurer. But the brothel has one more layer of complexity to navigate. The rules, or, more accurately, the house laws, and just as importantly, how to break them without ending up in a straw-stuffed dumpster or with the madam's legendary glare. Welcome to the medieval guide to brothel etiquette and survival. The rules themselves are simple in theory. No fighting, no theft, no insults to the staff, no attempts to sneak in a personal goat, and definitely no daring to argue with old Gregor or the house cat. Violating any of these rules carries consequences that range from minor humiliation to full-scale removal, or, in extreme cases, a dramatic public scolding. But simple rules rarely remain simple in practice. Interpretation is fluid, enforcement is selective, and every patron is a variable in a living, breathing social experiment. Entry rules are the first hurdle. Tokens, coins, or carefully bartered goods must be presented, and anything outside the madam's approval may be rejected or negotiated in creative ways. Forget to pay attention, hand over the wrong token, or underestimate the madam's patience, and you'll discover that rule enforcement involves not just words, but gestures, raised eyebrows, and the occasional pointed threat from the ever-watchful goat. Clever patrons learn to negotiate, charm, or distract while keeping a respectful distance from both staff and livestock. Once inside, rules shift from transactional to behavioral. Speak too loudly, argue with a fellow patron, or spill ale in the wrong direction, and you risk social penalties. Breaking the rules doesn't always result in physical punishment. Often, the offense is noted, whispered about, and exaggerated for future retelling. The house has a memory, and gossip is its long-term enforcement mechanism. You may survive the night physically unscathed, but your reputation may suffer, turning you into a cautionary tale for the next newcomer. There are also unwritten rules, the kind that only regulars understand. Sit in the correct chair, avoid interrupting the entertainment at key moments, and never, under any circumstances, antagonize the animals. Step too boldly into a territory claimed by the goat, cats, or even a particularly assertive chicken, and you'll discover firsthand why these rules exist. Subtle observation is crucial. The rules are less about authority and more about survival. Patrons quickly learn that bending or breaking them requires skill, timing, and an accurate assessment of risk versus reward. Breaking the rules, when done successfully, can be almost as rewarding as following them. A clever joke, a well-timed bribe, or a carefully executed maneuver to reclaim a chair or a mug can earn you respect, laughter, and bragging rights. But failure is conspicuous, and the consequences are swift. The madam's glare, a brawl sparked by a minor slight, or the social equivalent of exile, whispered about in stories retold long after you've left the premises. Rules also extend to interactions with staff. Respect is mandatory, flattery is strategic, and hesitation can be fatal, at least socially. You must navigate the delicate balance of charm, obedience, and humor, understanding that the madam's authority is both absolute and occasionally performative. Knowing when to comply, when to negotiate, and when to retreat is a skill that separates survivors from spectators. By the end of the night, you realize that the house laws are not just arbitrary restrictions. They are guides for navigating the chaos, ensuring survival, and maintaining a semblance of order. They are tested, bent, and occasionally broken, but always observed, remembered, and retold. Patrons who learn to understand them, respect them selectively, and break them strategically emerge wiser, braver, and better prepared for the next night of medieval adventure. So remember, rules in the brothel are part survival manual, part social contract, and part absurd comedy. Follow them, bend them, or break them, but do so with awareness, timing, and just enough audacity to survive the night and leave with both your dignity and your story intact. By now, you've navigated hallways, survived the ale, dodged the goat, endured the gossip, and possibly learned the madam's glare is sharper than any blade. But before you can truly relax, there's a fundamental question: how do you pay for all of this chaos? In the medieval brothel, currency is flexible, imaginative, and occasionally terrifying. Understanding what counts as payment is essential to survival. First, there are coins. The obvious choice. But beware. Medieval coins vary wildly in value, weight, and trustworthiness. A shiny copper piece might be worth enough for a modest service, or so the madam claims, while a silver coin could be scrutinized with suspicion, weighed against your reputation, your shoes, and, inexplicably, the goat's mood. Learning the local standard of exchange is crucial. Too little, and you risk offense; too much, and you invite both envy and negotiation. One wrong coin handed over at the wrong moment can result in extended interrogation, sideways glances, or a sharp "Are you mocking me?" from the staff. Barter is equally common and sometimes preferred. Patrons often offer goods instead of coins, and the list is as creative as it is horrifying. Turnips, onions, a hunk of cheese, or even a stray chicken can serve as payment. Items must be carefully inspected because the madam, and sometimes her staff, may judge quality, freshness, or audacity. A slightly rotten turnip, rejected. A chicken missing a leg, negotiable. A loaf of bread hardened to the consistency of stone might earn you extra brownie points if you spin a clever story about its origin. Sometimes, services themselves are offered as payment. A song performed on a one-stringed lute, a story about a scandalous encounter, or even a favor. Anything that entertains, amuses, or impresses the staff can serve as currency. These transactions require subtle skill, timing, confidence, and a touch of humor. Miscalculate, and you may find your story ignored, your song interrupted, or your favor politely refused, often with a look that suggests regret for having ever let you in. There's also the peculiar world of reputation currency. Doing a small favor for the madam, assisting a regular in a minor prank, or even performing a successful dodge of the goat can earn you social credit that translates directly into privileges, priority for rooms, or access to special menus of entertainment. These intangible tokens of exchange are sometimes more valuable than coins or goods because they provide influence and safety in an environment that thrives on chaos. Special circumstances complicate things further. Late arrivals, lost tokens, or patrons who overstay their welcome might be asked to offer double payment or make it up in kind. In these cases, ingenuity is rewarded. A cleverly crafted story, a piece of information, or even a willingness to humor a regular's eccentric request can secure passage. The rules are fluid, and flexibility is key. The madam and staff have the final say, but their judgments are shaped as much by amusement and practicality as by coin. By the end of the night, surviving the exchange of currency feels like an accomplishment in itself. You've learned that payment isn't just coins, it's negotiation, creativity, observation, and the ability to gauge what the brothel values at that precise moment. A turnip today might buy a room, a song tomorrow might buy safety. A compliment at the right time might earn a small mercy. Understanding the system, bending it when necessary, and navigating the whims of staff and animals alike is a core survival skill. So, as you clutch your remaining coins, polish your turnip, and make your way through the corridors, remember, in the medieval brothel, currency is less about money and more about strategy. Pay attention, pay creatively, and pay with just enough humility and audacity to survive the night. And maybe, if you're clever, to leave with both your dignity and your story intact. By now, you've survived alleys, bouncers, ale, stew, gossip, the goat, and the peculiar economics of payment. But in a medieval brothel, survival isn't just about avoiding spills or missteps. It's about immersing yourself in the atmosphere, and nowhere is that more apparent than in the music. The soundtrack of the night is chaotic, unpredictable, and somehow essential to the experience. The entertainment begins as soon as you enter. A one-stringed lute, plucked with a mix of enthusiasm and despair, provides the melodic foundation. The sound is unique. Somewhere between a mournful sigh and the squeal of a startled pig, it echoes off the thin walls and uneven beams. Patrons lean in, trying to decipher rhythm or melody, only to realize that any semblance of harmony is fleeting and entirely optional. The player, who may or may not be the cook, strums with determination, unaware or uncaring that each note sends a shiver of panic down your spine. Other performers join in. A juggler uses onions, mugs, or possibly small shoes, tossing them with surprising dexterity and occasional inaccuracy. Every successful catch is applauded, every dropped object results in laughter, and every misfire adds to the cacophony. Someone, somewhere, has brought a drum, though it sounds more like a hollow barrel being kicked in frustration than an instrument. Patrons clap, stomp, or sing along, creating a symphony that is entirely uncoordinated yet deeply immersive. Music is not limited to instruments. Singing erupts spontaneously. Patrons attempt ballads, nursery rhymes, or improvised ditties. Voices clash, notes collide, and pitch is a concept no longer relevant. Some guests harmonize accidentally, creating moments of brief, beautiful chaos before it dissolves into shouting or laughter. Every attempt at melody is a gamble. You might delight, disturb, or inadvertently provoke the goat to join in, which it does with gusto. The room itself amplifies the chaos. Thin wooden walls bounce sound unpredictably. Ceilings creak, and the floorboards amplify every stomp, shuffle, and foot drag. The animals contribute their own accompaniment. The cat's meows, the dog's bark, and the goose's honk synchronize in unexpected ways with the lute, forming rhythms no composer could intentionally create. Even the clatter of mugs and spilled food becomes percussion, completing the medieval orchestra of disorder. Interaction with the music is part of survival. Patrons sway, stomp, or dodge instruments and flying objects while trying to maintain balance, avoid spills, and not antagonize the animals. Laughter and shouting often accompany the rhythm, and a wrong note, or the wrong clap, can lead to minor chaos. Participating requires courage, quick reflexes, and a healthy sense of humor. Passive observation rarely suffices. The music demands engagement, and the room responds accordingly. Each performance, intentional or accidental, reinforces the unpredictability of the environment. Songs about heroic knights, failed romances, or the notorious regulars intertwine with the clatter, animal contributions, and off-key singing to create an atmosphere that is simultaneously exhausting, exhilarating, and unforgettable. The soundtrack of the night is not curated. It is lived, experienced, and survived. By the end of the night, you've learned a vital lesson. In the medieval brothel, music is more than entertainment. It is a mechanism for social connection, a source of chaos, and a test of endurance. Surviving the soundtrack requires patience, timing, and a willingness to embrace absurdity. When you finally leave, you carry with you the echoes of lute strings, hoots, claps, and meows, a reminder that in this world, harmony is a luxury, but survival and the ability to dance with chaos is priceless. By this point, you've navigated the alleys, dodged bouncers, survived ale, stew, gossip, rogue goats, music, and entertainment. You may think the night is winding down, but in the medieval brothel, social rules remain in full effect. Here, an informal, unwritten code governs behavior, sometimes called the bro code. It is a blend of loyalty, cunning, improvisation, and a generous dash of terrible advice. Understanding it is essential for survival. First, recognize the hierarchy. Regulars hold authority. They know where to sit, how to order, how to navigate the animals, and, crucially, how to interpret the madam's moods. They act as both guides and enforcers. Newcomers are watched closely. Every misstep, leaning in too aggressively, spilling ale, or misjudging the goat's tolerance, is noted. The code requires you to observe, learn, and adapt, often instantly, or risk becoming a cautionary tale whispered about for nights to come. Loyalty is part of the system. If a regular lends a piece of advice, where to sit, which mug is safest, or which route avoids the cat, they expect acknowledgement. Follow it, and you gain a small, essential measure of protection. Ignore it, and you might face teasing, practical jokes, or being nudged into the path of a mischievous goose. Brotherhood in the brothel is less about camaraderie and more about a delicate balance of respect, deference, and strategic compliance. Yet betrayal lurks alongside loyalty. Friends today may turn into minor adversaries tomorrow if coins are stolen, turnips are misplaced, or gossip spreads. The medieval bro code encourages careful negotiation, selective sharing of information, and an acute awareness of who benefits from each action. Everyone is simultaneously ally, observer, and potential antagonist. Misreading intentions can result in minor social exile, a prank gone wrong, or even being assigned the undesirable task of retrieving spilled stew. Advice is plentiful and often hazardous. Patrons offer guidance on everything: how to navigate the goat, which stool is safest, or even how to flirt with grace. Some of this advice is genuinely helpful. Much of it is nonsense, steeped in superstition, poor judgment, or misremembered events. Following it without caution can result in minor injuries, embarrassment, or lost coins. Savvy patrons learn to filter counsel, separating wisdom from folly and choosing which tips to apply in the heat of the moment. Competition is subtle but constant. Everyone aims to survive, enjoy the ale, and emerge with stories and reputation intact. Achievements, escaping the goat unscathed, negotiating a seat successfully, or charming the madam for a small favor, are observed, evaluated, and remembered. Success earns subtle respect, while failure provides entertainment and lessons for the next round of patrons. It's a living system of rewards and consequences, entirely informal, yet rigorously enforced through observation and storytelling. Finally, humor is the currency that binds it all together. A well-timed joke, a clever maneuver around a brawl, or a dramatic retelling of an absurd misstep can win friends, or at least temporary truce. Humor helps diffuse tension, negotiate chaos, and survive the social labyrinth. Patrons who master it understand that laughter is not just pleasure, it's protection, diplomacy, and sometimes survival. By the end of the night, the medieval bro code has revealed itself. A complex web of loyalty, betrayal, guidance, and missteps, all navigated with humor, quick thinking, and careful observation. Surviving this code is as essential as dodging the goat, avoiding spills, or surviving a misfired loot string. Those who understand it leave with more than coins. They leave with respect, stories, and a nuanced understanding of human behavior under pressure. In the medieval brothel, social navigation is just as vital as survival, and mastering the bro code is a mark of true resilience. By now, you've endured alleys, bouncers, ale, stew, gossip, animals, music, midnight mishaps, and the delicate navigation of the bro code. You may think you've seen it all, but suddenly, the dynamics shift. Enter the nobles and clergy. Their visits are rare, unpredictable, and almost always transformative, both for the patrons and for the stories that will circulate for months, if not years. Welcome to the unexpected drama of high-status guests in the medieval brothel. When a noble arrives, the room collectively holds its breath. These visitors might be local lords, minor aristocrats, or clerics with enough authority to ruin an entire evening with a single word. They stride, or wobble, into the common room, often disguised as commoners, though their fine fabrics, unusually clean hands, and faint aura of entitlement give them away. Regular patrons know the signs immediately, watching their every move, measuring tone, and calculating the correct balance between respect and amusement. The interaction rules shift instantly. Respect is mandatory. Humor becomes cautious. Even the madam, who normally governs with a mix of iron authority and wry amusement, moves carefully. Her decisions are deliberate, her glances sharp, and her instructions carried out with precision. A single misstep, spilled ale, inappropriate comment, or mismanaged introduction could escalate from embarrassment to outright disaster. These visits are as much social exams as they are recreational. Clergy are even trickier. They arrive ostensibly to save souls, but their true interest may range from evaluating morality to surveying potential tithes, or simply satisfying curiosity. Their presence is both intimidating and entertaining. Patrons scramble to appear respectable, attempting to hide minor infractions, misbehavior, or the lingering aroma of last night's ale and stew. Every action is scrutinized, and even a small faux pas, like a misplaced comment or a casual glance at a misbehaving goat can trigger whispers, judgmental stares, or formal admonishment. Yet, nobles and clergy are human. They bring stories, gossip, and sometimes absurd behaviors of their own. One noble might overestimate his skill at drinking ale, sloshing mugs in dramatic fashion that ends in puddles and laughter. A bishop may lecture on virtue while stepping into a stray chicken, muttering apologies to an audience that barely hides its amusement. Their presence adds layers to the chaos: sudden authority, unexpected comedy, and the thrill of unpredictability. So, here we are, dawn is breaking, and you've survived a night in the most notorious brothel medieval Europe could cook up. Or at least, you've made it to sunrise with your sense of humor barely intact and a fresh appreciation for antibacterial soap. Let's take a moment to honor your struggle. Tonight, you braved smoky candlelight, hay mattresses, pickpockets in training, and at least one chicken with boundary issues. You navigated the confusing economics of turnip-based currency, sampled wine that should probably be registered as a weapon, and learned more about medieval hygiene than any modern human should ever have to. You've waded through a minefield of gossip, goat theft, and romantic negotiations that felt more like tax audits. And you did it all with the quiet resilience of someone determined to make it to morning. If only so you could tell yourself, well, at least it wasn't Monday. But above all, you've survived the real challenge, a reminder of just how soft we've become. The next time you slip into clean sheets, reach for a glass of real water, or even just flush a toilet. Maybe take a second to thank the unlucky souls of history who paved the way with aching backs and suspicious rashes. Because history may be filthy, itchy, and occasionally set on fire by accident, but it's also proof that humans are stubborn, resourceful, and always just a little bit ridiculous. You wouldn't last a night in a medieval brothel, but the people who did? They found ways to laugh, endure, and keep the fire going. Sometimes literally, with a goat blocking the door. So tonight, as you drift off in your safe, modern bed, let a little gratitude sneak in with the comfort. You're living the dream, at least by medieval standards. Rest easy, and may your dreams be free of chickens, mysterious puddles, and unsolicited turnips. Good night, and see you in the next absurd corner of history.